Okay, we're continuing in the Lively Encounters chapter 7. We're on page 75. We really didn't start this last week. I mean, we kind of did, but I'll go back to the beginning. So the text starts announcing that this is a meeting or encounter between Hui Neng and the monk bhikshu Zhi-Chang. What is Zhi-Chang? What is that Zhi-Chang? Anybody know the? Huh? Chang, permanent? And Zhi is what? Huh? Wisdom. Oh, okay. Sort of unchanging or lasting wisdom. So the monk Zhi-Chang was from Guishi in Xin province. He left home to become a monk when he was a child and was intent on discovering his own nature. One day he visited the master and paid his respects. And the master asked him, "Where are you from and what do you want?" So, kind of some interesting things going on here. What does it mean he left home to become a monk when he was a child? I mean, what do you guess? How old can someone be to actually leave home to become a monk when a child? 1, 2, 3? How old? I mean, and did he get his parents' permission, or did he just take off? Nobody.
Isn't there some minimum age by which
Well,
they're able to make a decision?
And of course that changes with time. The average 10-year-old today is maybe 3, and the 3-year-old of the past might be 10. It's not that as time goes on, wisdom increases or children mature faster. They may grow up faster, but that doesn't mean they develop faster. But in any event, we do know that to ordain as a monk, he has to be how old? Wow.
18?
No, that's the drinking age in America. You got to go one more year. 19. Okay, you can ordain at age 19. So he becomes, but you can become a monk in the sense that you can become a novice or a shramanarika, or sometimes in Chinese, shami. It's a neophyte. And that can happen really at quite any age. Normally, you'd want to have, and you'd expect that the parents would give permission for this to happen. In some cases, it gets kind of strange. Sometimes the child really wants to do this, and the parents resist because they have other plans in mind, especially if it's a boy. Sorry, I mean, it's the way it was, and to some extent still is. In other cases, the child doesn't want, and the parents want him to. And so, quickly leave home and cross us over, if that's sort of what they have in mind. But there's also, there's only so much land to go around in a family. And it's called primogeniture, and this was a problem in Europe and Asia. So if you have your insurance policy or your Social Security benefits were called children. And it wasn't like you had the state giving you things. So the way, as you got old, you were to be taken care of was to have children who would be filial and then feed you, clothe you, and take care of you. And so given mortality rates and all the vicissitudes of life, you were a safe bet not to just have one child. This is part of the pressure that's on, on modern China, which is this one-child policy, which they're lapsing now. Now, they may be lapsing it because they figure they're not going to provide social benefits anymore. It's like, get ready. It's back to. And unfortunately, sometimes what this does is you have a plot of land. At this time, of course, China was very, very agricultural. Most people made their living by tilling the soil of some form. So that was all you had. Now, if you had 5 or 6 kids, then that land, when you left, their inheritance was subdivided by 5 or 6 plots. Well, you can see, after a few generations, you're going to be down to a plot about the size of this book. And keep dividing. There's not much you can do with that. So sometimes they had them because they wanted to bank on if the children died, they'd still have a couple left that could take care of them and continue the family name, which is the other thing they talk about. I don't know how important that really is, as much as being taken care of, but let's let that go. And so sometimes if children going off to other professions or whatnot, going off to the military be one way, passing the formal exams and going off to the capital, become a scholar or an official, or going off to the monastery and becoming a monk. So they leave home and then they're not under your care anymore, and they don't care for you. Now there's another thing that happens, a funny practice. I don't think it's going on anymore, but it was, which was you were afraid when you had children that they might die young. This is not uncommon. And so, again, medicine being what it was and whatnot, very iffy, you sought the divine protection for the child. But you would do that by promising the child to the Buddha. So when the baby's born, you come to the monastery, you ask for a blessing from the monks or nuns there. You bring your child to the altar and you bow to the Buddha, and then promise the Buddha that when your child reaches 19, they will leave home and join the monastery. And so here's your future Buddhas and Bodhisattvas right here, but you'd want to protect them, right, to make sure that they make it to 19 years old and get in. And then sometimes you'd actually make out a slip with the child's name and say, child so-and-so, child, let's say Roger, or child Ken, and then you put that on there. It's promised to the Buddha at age 19 to become a Sangha. And you pin it up in the monastery. And so it wasn't really sincere, because at 19 you go and take it back and say, made it. So there was all kinds of weird stuff. In this case, none of that seems to be going on. He seems to have had a wish or resolve at an early age. He probably then, I'm guessing, was probably maybe 10 or 11 that he was able to draw near. And that's not uncommon to see young children with shaved heads in robes in the monastery and being taken care of. And they study and they learn and they kind of, thank you, they sometimes, play around, do what kids do depending on the sincerity. But by the time they get to 17, 18, 19, then they're getting ready really to enter monastic life in a serious way. And they undergo a different kind of training. So my guess is he left young. He did probably ordain when he was 19. But I think this child discovering his own nature is a really profound statement. It's saying something to the effect that fresh into the world, he came with causes and conditions that inclined him to the spiritual. And that's pretty interesting. Most children grow up and they just want to play and have games and goof around and things like this. But for some reason, he comes in with this, you could say, disposition or predisposition. How do you explain that? Do you know any children like this? It doesn't have to be Buddhist. It could be, let's say, do you know children who are unusual in the sense that they're not interested in doing what other children doing or playing their games? They might be very serious about music, for example, or about studying and reading to the point where they actually live in a different world unto themselves. Or in this case, maybe really serious about spiritual practice and cultivation. Know anybody like that? No? Yes? Were you like that? Okay. There are children like that. And the text say this is having planted seeds in previous lives, good seeds, then in a particular life you're born in, they start to blossom earlier and earlier. And if your karma is lighter and lighter, the obstacles preventing you from tending toward the spiritual happen very quickly. For a lot of people, and I'm saying everybody has this spiritual nature, I'm going to go along with the text here that it is, but it manifests in different degrees depending on our karma, our causes and conditions, the obstacles we bring with us. For some people, it takes a jolt. Many stories of monks and nuns you see, they encounter death of a loved one for the first time. See a child die, or they have a parent or die, and all of a sudden it just stops them. I'm going, whoa, wait a minute. What is this about? We're only born to die. And this is one of the things, if you look at the life of the Buddha, was one of those turning points for the Buddha himself, encountering death. Or sickness. And then something like, or some tragedy causes them to wake up and realize that everything's impermanent and we're living into something of a bubble. But in this case, and those are kind of exterior dramatic events. But in this case, there's a positive longing for purity and stillness that is manifested at a very early age, and it almost remains incorruptible. It's not misled. And what the telltale sign of this is, oh, come on, what's the turning point for a young person? Being a mother, you would know. Any particular age.
Teenage?
Yeah, the teenage. When everything changes and now you have two children, the one that you brought into the world and this one. It's like, who is this? It's a Jekyll and Hyde thing often. But somebody who is like this doesn't change. It stays the same. The texts talk about this. They say it's like the evergreen tree. I think they say the cypress. Winter, fall, spring, summer, it remains green. It just doesn't change its color. Cultivator of the way sets their mind and it doesn't alter in this way. It just stays ever constant. So this obviously this child's and intent on discovering his own nature. He wasn't there for attention or fame or because home was boring. It was a lot of fun to hang out in the monastery, or in some cases because monasteries did get food and clothing, endowments and medicine. It was kind of like a guaranteed safety net in your life. And so this is one of the things in monastic ordination where you are usually the teaching acharya's job is to filter out people who are coming for the wrong reasons. So of course this happens when you first come in, but before you're ready to ordain, there's a series of questions that you go through, and it's like, really, why are you here? I mean, it's formal. It's like, so why are you here? You're running away from a bad marriage? You're running away from debt? Have you just been drafted and I want to get out in the military, and so on and so forth? You go through a whole series of questions, and it's to keep this from happening. But this says he was intent. What does it mean he's intent on discovering his own nature? Anybody?
Getting to the bottom of it all.
I think so. Getting to the bottom of it all. There's some inclination he has that there's something deep and true within his own being. Now maybe he's not clear about it, but it's so strong and powerful that everything else pales. Fame, family, marriage, friends, money, none of this matters except for this one thing. And this is sort of what's his raison d'etre. This is what's really driving him. So this is somebody who's got very, very deep, good roots, who's very sincere. And the master asks him then, where are you from and what do you want? Where have we seen this before? Huh?
When he first go to the temple, when Sixth Patriarch.
When Hui Neng came to the temple, he got the same question. And what did Hui Neng answer?
Doesn't matter.
Huh?
Doesn't matter where you come.
Oh, no, but when he said, where are you from and what do you want? He said, yeah, I'm from the south and I want to be a Buddha. And then the fifth patriarch says, you're from the south. What are you talking about? You can't become a Buddha. That's the barbaric province. But this doesn't happen here. He replies, we go on, I recently went to White Peak Mountain, Baifangshan, in Hung Province, where I bowed in respect to High Master Da Tong to receive his instruction on realizing Buddhahood, which is another expression basically of discovering one's own nature, realizing Buddhahood by seeing one's own nature. So this is an understanding he has that what it means to see one's nature is to actually see to the Buddha potential here. That's their equivalent. But I have some lingering doubts. I've traveled this great distance to bow to you. I humbly hope that the Master will be so compassionate to guide me. Okay. This brings up a very interesting question. Why didn't he stay with Da Tong? He went to Da Tong obviously for a good reason, and then he left Da Tong. What I'm trying to get at is, how do you know when you need a teacher and when you can go it your own? And how do you know what is a good teacher and what is not a good teacher? And further, how would you know, even if it's a good teacher, when it's time to leave? Or do you stay forever? And who decides, the teacher or you? These are all very interesting questions. Now, some of you feel maybe you don't need a teacher. And we've seen earlier where the Sixth, I think it's early, did the Sixth, we get to that part yet? You may think I'm saying you need a Shanjirsher, but yeah. Do you remember that passage? He's saying, I'm not absolutely saying you need a good teacher, but if you're so confused and upside down and morally dissolute, you better get one, because you won't be able to discern without. And yet, the good teacher is not, seemingly in this text, a lifelong companion. Why not? Because they're hard to get along with. It's like a bad marriage. No, why? Why is the good teacher not a lifelong relationship?
Gotta fly free at some point.
Huh?
Gotta fly free at some point.
You got to fly free, but that implies that flying free is the goal. So this is very different. The teacher's not your savior, or your redeemer. A teacher is sort of a guide that helps you get you on the way. And once you're on the way, you got to walk it yourself. So any teacher that's holding on to a disciple would not be a good teacher for whatever reasons, But then, in that case, the teacher would say, much as you'd like to stay, and as much as I like you, or don't, it's time for you to go. And where have we seen this motif? This is a famous motif. Don't be shy. Come on. Any other text?
Sudana or Sudana?
Yeah, Sudana. What did you say?
I was saying Sudana.
Sudana, good. The pure youth, goodwill. Thank you. And what happens with Sudana? He has serial relationships with teachers. He goes through how many?
52 or 53.
53, let's say, 52 or 53. And he moves from teacher to teacher, but he doesn't leave them because he has lingering doubts. Am I right? Why does he leave?
Because the teacher asked him to go for a better one.
Well, maybe a better teacher or a more appropriate one for, in other words, he comes into one teacher and that teacher shapes him up in a certain way and gets him ready, and that prepares him for the next teacher who can take him on. So it's a shaping technique. It's not necessarily better, but it's staged appropriate. As he moves up to deeper understanding and more self-cultivation, he's open to other kinds of teachings and learning. And this teacher then, that's how it's presented. He says, good youth. South of here, there's a bhikshu or a bhikshuni or a soldier or even a woman of the night who's called such and such. You should go to her or him, travel this direction. When you get to them, bow, circumambulate 3 times and ask them your questions, which are, how do I win the lottery? No. Okay, so what's the questions he's asking? 2 questions. Come on, you guys.
How to bring forth the body.
How to practice the Bodhisattva path? Okay, we'll just leave it. Essentially, he wants to know how to cultivate the bodhisattva path. And each teacher gives him more and deeper and better advice. But it could also be he's being sent on so he doesn't form attachments to the teacher. Maybe the teacher can. Because he starts out with Manjushri, for Pete's sakes. I mean, Manjushri is, you can't get much better than Manjushri. I mean, dream on. You'd like to have Manjushri as your teacher. Be careful, though, what you wish for. Because, Manjushri, we have an image of Manjushri. Where's Manjushri?
Behind you.
Behind you.
Yeah. There's Manjushri, right?
No, this is, that one. With the sword,
Yeah, Manjushri has swords and pestles and things. And that isn't to serve you cake and ice cream. It's to bonk you over the head. So Manjushri is the dispenser of great wisdom. We always think of wisdom as like, I want great wisdom, give it to me, and then the lights turn on, the movie version, and wisdom rains down, and it's Disney-like. But often wisdom comes like a bolt of lightning. Wisdom is the opposite of attachment. Wisdom comes when attachments break open, and sometimes attachments break open rather roughly or crudely. And so you have to be ready when you go to Manjushri that this is not, lovey-dovey, swaddling sort of thing going on here, but can often be very, very direct and powerful. In any event, could be that Manjushri could have taught him everything, but there was this thing about non-attachment and not clinging. And it's very easy, I must say. I too went through this experience, but my teacher gave me no place to get hold. Every time I tried to hug my teacher, sort of metaphorically speaking, it was like the quills went up and it was like a porcupine. Did you ever hug a porcupine? It happens if you hug a porcupine. Whoa. And so when I was in need and desperate and down, there was this incredible warmth and kindness there. And as soon as I tried to reach out and hold on to it, came the porcupine. And so it was like, wow, this is hard. How am I going to get to hug and cling to my teacher? And it never happened. There was no allowance for that. So the impulse is when you're starting, and what happens here is you get the teacher, and it's so helpful, it's so beneficial, it's so clarifying, that it can lead you to a kind of dependency, that you don't feel like you could do it yourself, that you always have to rely. And so the teacher has this delicate job of giving you support and giving you advice, but not letting it turn into leaning on or depending on it. So the teacher's more of a catalyst than a cradle. And so this becomes very important because, and often you don't want to leave. And so the teacher has to do this thing to push you out a little bit, but only when you're ready. But you don't think you're ready. See, this is the funny part. So there's a real tension going on here. But I'm suggesting that maybe with Sudna, it's Manjushri could have taught him everything, but then he might have been attached to Manjushri, or he might have thought Manjushri is the one and only. And by going around, he saw the diversity of the Buddha mind, the Buddha heart manifest in all these beings and started having an awakening like that. Because some of the teachers he went to didn't look like teachers. They looked like losers or scary. And he learned that the Buddha nature manifests through all these dimensions and whatnot. So it was a really wonderful experience for him. So in this case, however, he's not sent on by Datung. He moves himself on. What do you think about that? Have you ever had a situation where you had a teacher and then you left and moved on? Now, of course, I'm not telling you kindergarten you have to. Every grade you have to. Even if you want to hang out at the university and become an eternal student, it's just a limit. At 60, they start to think maybe you should get out of the freshman class and move on. You've quadruple majored and, whatever. But
Well, here he said, I have some lingering doubts.
Meaning, Datung didn't settle all his questions or doubts. What's going on there? See, it's very subtle. People who are really cultivating this is extremely important because you have to figure out, it's really hard to do this alone. I'm just telling you. You want to do this thing alone, it's hard. Because even if you say, oh, I'm going to just take a text and read it, well, okay, good. And what it means and what it's asking you to do, it's not necessarily clear. Moreover, there's a little thing called shi and maobing, which are bad habits and habituated faults of character. None of you have. But if you did, they're very hard to spot and root out. And we're really good at covering them over. In fact, we can make them into our assets. Really funny how this works. And we can fool everybody with them, but what happens is you tie yourself into gilded knots with these things. And so here, the question is he leaving because the teacher got under his skin a little bit, and maybe rubbed him a little bit, and so he's going to somebody who's going to say, oh, you've been leaving home since you were a little boy, really good, come with me, and then he feels really inflated? Or is he leaving, and this is a little trickier because the teacher is not sufficient in some way or not adequate? See, this is hard because, and what I'm saying is hard is that there's a dynamic tension. In the Avatamsaka says, Manjushri says to Sudana, good wealth, young man, you should know that first and foremost, for cultivating the path to Buddhahood, you have to find a Kalyana Mitra. You have to find a Shanjursha, a good and wise advisor. A good and wise advisor is indispensable for the realization of awakening. And he goes on with these beautiful chapter. A good and wise is like a bridge that crosses you from one place to the other. The good and wise is like a cool pool in which it just goes on, and then you leave them. And so, whoa, and going, wait a minute. So if this is the case, where do you get, you're supposed to have that really open, devout, I won't say submission, but almost like that, surrender to the good and wise advisor, and yet at the same time, he has doubts. So does that indicate that he really didn't take him as a teacher? That he kind of only took him as a teacher partially, and that's why he's leaving, because he didn't get the full benefit, because he didn't get the full commitment? I mean, some of you wrestle with this, you've been to different places, different teachers and whatnot, and you're kind of like, how do you work this exactly? How do you know that it's because the teacher is not complete or whole that you need further instruction, as opposed to you're not complete or whole, or you're covering something over, or you don't want something to be uncovered, and you leave?
It sounds like he's got good instincts to have started so young and been so sure, so maybe he can trust his own inner guide.
That's interesting. I hadn't thought of it, and I think, in a sense that because we have this prelude where he's very young and done this and staying steady, we could assume that he's probably got good roots in discernment. He's got good stabilizing things here. I'm just asking, I'm throwing this out almost rhetorically to an extent, and I'm not also throwing it out with the idea that there are answers provided by the text we can't go into tonight that actually give you maps that you can use to answer the questions I just posed about how to find, how long to stay, how to discern, when and if to leave, and so on and so forth. And how to evaluate and judge and assess whether it's good teaching. And it's not just how you feel. See, this is very, very careful, because feelings before true letting go and awakening are not necessarily reliable, nor is your analytical mind. I mean, the Sutra in 42 sections says, until you reach fourth stage of Arhat, you can't trust your own mind. Yeah, Gee, have I been taking a misguided teacher all these years by trusting my mind? Kaiwula, awakening. Sometimes it's a good friend, and sometimes it really screws you. Right? As with your emotion, I can always trust my emotions. Oh, okay. Anyhow, in this particular case, let's assume that he left because the doubts were something that wasn't working, and his way of knowing it was working was be what? What's one of the things you can trust in your cultivation and in your relationship, say, with the Dharma teacher? I'm not being, dreams maybe, mystical visions maybe, maybe not, but something very pragmatic and obvious. This is fun. This is like a test. I must have said this 100 times, but I didn't, and I'm repeating what the text said 100 times. It's called klesha cleansing. If the klesha is being cleansed, if your faults and bad habits are reducing, if your negative emotions and afflictions are reducing, you're on the path. It's not because you can sit for 3 hours, or you see Guanyin Bodhisattva, or a lotus flower lifts you up someday, and and la la la. But it's whether as your anger, your greed, your jealousy, your torpor, your anxiety and stress going down, then you have some marker to know it's probably okay. And be careful here, because sometimes you say, oh yes, I've renounced all the things of the world and I've taken refuge with this teacher. But does the teacher inspire you to have spiritual penetrations or powers? Encourage you to be hungry for altered states of consciousness, or, what we call shantong. Or if you stay around long enough, you're going to open your 5th eye, your 6th eye, your 10th eye, or whatever, and you're going to be able to da-da-da. Because it's really, right there, you're actually inflaming klesha, not reducing it. It's now spiritual greed as opposed to material greed, but it's the same mind. You've got to be really careful. Okay. The master said, what did he teach you? Try to repeat his actual words to me. This is taking on something here. So we go to the next page. You notice there's no... Let me say it this way. What's interesting about this encounter, there's no like, why'd you come? Back and forth, push, rub. He's just brought right in. Which tells me that he's sincere and he's right on. And the Sixth Patriarch doesn't have to do any adjustment here. Oh, you didn't even bow. What's that about? Or what do you do? Well, I recited 1,000. Nothing like that. He's coming right in. So this guy's pretty straight and doesn't need that kind of... Zhi Chang said, I was there for 3 months without having received any instructions. Being eager for the Dharma, one evening I went alone to the abbot's room and asked him, what is my original mind, my fundamental nature? He's just going to go and get it now. And Da Tong then said to me, and here's his answer, do you see empty space? Yes, I answered, I see it. Da Tong said, when you see empty space, what appearance does it have? I replied, empty space is formless. How could it have an appearance? Da Tong said, your fundamental nature is just like empty space in that there's not a single thing that can be seen. This is called true seeing. And then there's nothing that can be known. This is called true knowing. It has no blue or yellow, long or short, just seeing the purity of the original source. That is the essence of enlightenment. That the essence of enlightenment is perfect and bright. This is called realizing Buddhahood by seeing one's nature. It's also called the knowledge and vision of the Tathagata. Although I've heard this explanation, I still do not understand and implore you, Master, instruct me. This, the first time I read this, I thought, that's not bad.
Pretty good.
That's pretty good. It's pretty good. It's reasonable. It's like, seems to make really, what's wrong with this kid? Or, this monk. You could find elements of this throughout various texts. In fact, you could even see it in the Sixth Patriarch, because he talks about empty space too. So this is really what's interesting here. There's a passage we've been reading in our Buddhist hermeneutics class, which has to do how do you know and how do you find a teacher, and how do you test authenticity and authority and so forth. And there's one text from the Theravada Pali tradition that says, you can run into a bhikkhu who is eminently renowned, who has a large following, receives many offerings, speaks the Dharma very clearly and eloquently. It's good at the beginning, good in the middle, good at the end. He is virtuous and good and doesn't create scandals. It's not just like you read in the New York Times that this eminent religious leader was having affairs. There's nothing like that. And the text says, but could not be a good teacher for one reason. And you're going, what could it be? He has a wrong view. Dristi. And having that wrong view, everything else right with that one wrong view, will mislead you. So this is, we'll go over this some other lecture, what these dristi things are, but it's really important that it seems, I'm just going here, it seems like everything's copacetic and this is concurrent with everything that's taught. It'd be hard to fault this, really. as a beginning, or even this monk, Changkunt. Changkunt. And yet, this is what's interesting, it didn't deliver somehow. This is really interesting. It seems right, it seems philosophically, religiously sound, and yet he doesn't find it penetrating. What's that about? That's really interesting. And he can't say why. You see, that's the other thing. He can't say, there's something wrong about what you just said. But he feels it's not working somehow. So this is a very interesting discerning thing. You know, it's not like he says, oh, the way to Buddhahood is to eat, drink, and be merry. And he says, I had lingering doubts about that. No, it's nothing like that. It's very subtle. It seems to be right on, logical, and rupa, according to the Dharma. And yet, it's not working. So I'm teasing this out as what you pay attention to. Because you have to have your own meters working. You have to have your own discerning devices working. You can't just suspend judgment and say, so obviously something's not working for him. The master, Hui Neng, says that teacher's explanation still retains the idea of knowing and seeing. That's why you haven't fully understood, and I will teach you through a verse. Whoa. Now you could say that teacher's explanation still retains the view, drishti, not just the idea of knowing and seeing. Now, without reading on, does that open a door of understanding for you? I see some heads going, some heads going, some heads going. Okay. So why doesn't that clarify it for you? It still retains an idea of knowing and seeing.
Well, actually, because what I thought was off in the teacher's explanation to begin with was that he was sort of trying to hand the moon to the person rather than pointing toward it. And you can't do that.
Instead of giving him the means to find the answer himself, he was giving him the answer.
Yeah.
And that was what was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Anybody else?
Still something to get. But if you know something
How's
to
that?
achieve, something to
There's a tone of getting or achieving in there, maybe? Yeah? Anything else? Well, let me ask you this way. You think I'm the greatest teacher in the world. You've heard it, right? And so you come to me and I tell you this. What are you going to do with that? How are you going to practice that? I mean, it sounds good. And I say, there you go. Just no knowing and no seeing. Got it, Ken? Go off and work. How are you going to work on that? What are you going to do?
I'm a very practical person. It doesn't work for me.
You're very practical. It doesn't work. The Buddha was very practical too, by the way. He wasn't an abstract philosopher. He was very practical. More practical than most people. And if it didn't work, he didn't buy it. So don't think, oh, I'm very practical, unlike the Buddha. The Buddha was extremely practical. You're born, you die, there's age, you're like, okay, let's get with it here. Fairyland I want to go to. Okay, so I'm just raising this question. How do you put this into, how would you practice this then? In other words, the monk is coming in wanting to discover the truth and its essential nature. And we know that this is cultivation. You have to work on this. You have to remove the obstacles and impediments to that, right? And so the good teacher is kind of pointing to those very subtle places where you would be hung up or not see it, with the idea of dispensing medicine and so forth. What do you do with this medicine? What does it, what does it deliver? See, it sounds great, but then how do you take it up and practice it? What were you going to say? Anything?
No can do.
No, what do you think?
I feel like Platoni's answer can lead to a kind of nihilism. Yeah, and because there is nothing to be seen and nothing to be known, it could lead to a kind of mental nothingness. And that is a sort of wrong view. And the idea of knowing and seeing, he still
Yeah, I think you're all on to something here. Let's look at his verse and see, but I think we have a couple things that there's some seeking involved in here, perhaps, some lingering wanting. And then there's this duality that's created between seeing and not seeing, knowing and not knowing, as if they were two different things. So he says, not to see a single thing still holds on to seeing nothing. Much like floating clouds blocking the face of the sun. So this is, I love these verses when they do that. Because they're giving a concrete metaphor. What is this? What are the floating clouds blocking the face of the sun? The floating clouds are? Huh? Well, they could be klesha, but here they're not seen. They're actually shutting down the seeing and blocking the face of the sun's still there, but you're not seeing it clearly. You're seeing it through, I'm not seeing. And the not to know a single thing still holds to knowing nothing. This is really good. Now this last line, this is very Chinese Dwalian sort of thing. You have clouds blocking sun, lightning flashing out of empty space. That's a perfect Dwalian, right, matching couplet. But what does that mean? Even as lightning flashes out of empty space. Anybody? We understood the first one, I think. There could be another interpretation, but I think it's referring to you create clouds with this view, and it blocks the sun. That's what not seen is. And you're not knowing, or knowing nothing, is as lightning flashing out of empty space. What does that mean? Going once? Going twice?
It's like, how can you not know when the lightning is like coming out of empty space?
Say that again?
It's like, how can you ignore the fact that lightning comes out of empty space? It's so obvious or so evident.
I think you're onto something. I might say it a little differently, but I think it's saying the not knowing is the empty space void. But in that void, lightning flashes. It's not really a void. In other words, in empty space is the 10,000 things. It's not an empty space. And you're hanging on to it. Boom, lightning comes right out of it. And it's almost like, now do you see? Now do you know? In other words, you're creating a false emptiness that's not in reality, and you're clinging to it. And lightning breaks it wide open. Now what are you supposed to do when lightning comes? And that's where it's getting into his really fundamental teaching here, is that, I'll quote you, read you this passage. It's coming up. This is one of the next encounters. When a person who's been meditating by this method of, and I think somebody was right, of dumbing down, entering a still dullness where I don't know, I don't see, I'm unaware, feeling that that's purity and cultivation, Sixth Patriarch's always warning against that. He's saying real meditation doesn't happen sitting, it happens in all 24 compartments of all aspects of life. Anything that just has it with sitting or whatnot is an attachment. It's not the true mind. The true mind is unattached, unbound, everywhere engaged, nowhere detached, so forth, right? In the midst of appearances, not attached to appearances, and so forth. So this, I don't see, I'm not aware, this teacher, this monk has been doing, I'm just jumping ahead and I'll read you the text. So when he meets a disciple of Hui Neng, and Hui Neng's disciple says, what are you doing? Well, I've been sitting in still meditation, not thinking, not da-da-da. And he says, oh, well, too bad. What do you mean too bad? He says, that's not my teacher. Hui Neng teaches. And he says, what is your teacher? And here's the line. My teacher explains it as a subtle, wondrous, perfect serenity that interacts both in essence and application with reality as it truly is. Here the five skandhas are fundamentally empty. The six sensory realms do not exist. One neither enters or comes out of this samadhi concentration. It cannot be settled into or disturbed. In other words, it can't be not knowing and not seeing, nor seeing and knowing. The essence of Chan concentration is non-dwelling, clinging to nothing. It goes beyond even the act of dwelling in meditative stillness, or dwelling in not knowing and not seeing. I'm adding. Chan's concentration by its very nature cannot be initiated. And you cannot even conceive the thought or idea of it. The mind is like empty space, yet without any notion of empty space. Without even a notion of empty space. So this is later, but I thought I'd jump ahead to sort of see where he's going with this. How? How? Yeah. Let me give you my own humble illustration. Because, how do I say this? When you first start to cultivate, you realize you don't have any self-mastery whatsoever. This is the first humbling awareness. No matter how successful you are in the world and whatnot, you come to cultivation, it's like, yeah, and then you sit for 5 minutes, you go, whoa, it hurts, I'm sore, and my mind's just running wild. Maybe tomorrow will be better, and it's worse. And it just gets worse. Maybe if I go to one of those 7-day retreats, whoa, then it's like really discouraging because it's just like, wow. And you go, what is going on? And it's because, in the text say, because your eyes and your ears and your nose and your tongue and your body are attaching to things, are grasping and going on and clinging and whatnot. It's just a mad monkey grasping here. And you say, well, I'll just kill that monkey. I'll subdue that monkey. And so you start to get into this thing of thinking, I'll crush sights and sounds and smells, which you can do by actually doing that, destroying things that are attractive to the eyes and ears, and you start to live into this sensory-deprived world, thinking you're getting awakened. No pictures, no fragrances, no food with any flavor. You know, you start to go down this path and thinking, I'm cultivating unattachment. And then, for your mind, when it comes up, you just start using willpower to repress stuff. When dharmas arise from the mind, you do that and think you're, and that's what you kind of feel like, I'm cultivating now, I'm getting a handle on this. So, my own experience along these lines, Hung Shui and I were doing this bowing pilgrimage, and one of the goals of the pilgrimage was to actually, early on, subdue the mind so we could get to better things. Did I hear a snicker? Well, after the first week, I wasn't successful. After the first month, I wasn't successful. After the first year, I wasn't successful. And the teacher would always come out, and invariably we'd be talking and whatnot, and have a lunch or something, and he'd say, tell me, how's it going? Did you subdue your mind yet? No, I haven't. Well, keep working, jing, jing, vigor. Like, I'm trying really hard. Oh, you're trying really hard. Good. And this went on for a long time, along with the taunt, did you make it through the pain gate with your meditation? Because I'd sit for 43 and a half minutes. I timed it, and every 43 and a half minutes, all of a sudden the pain would hit the hips and the knees. And at 44, it was becoming more intense. By 45, it was unbearable. And I'd have to uncross my legs. Oh, I made it through. I tried everything. Anyhow, so did you make it through the pain gate? No. Have you subdued your mind? No. Okay. So then I figured out, okay, I know what to do. Because basically it's saying, cut off this outflow. Break these attachments. So I thought, okay, I'm going to pull back my eyes and my ears, my nose, my tongue, and my body awareness, just to start with, and I'm going to enter samadhi, total concentration, and I'm not going to see those sights or hear those sounds or smell those smells and so forth, or feel those things, and when he comes out, he'll see that and I'll wait for the question, have you subdued? Yeah, I have. It's all ready. So, and I thought I was imitating him. So we're in a little north of San Francisco. It's this time of the year, spring. Everything's in bloom, right? And that whole last week, I've been really trying. I actually open my eyes just to see where I was, and then bow, come up, not pay attention, look quickly, and then go, so I didn't go off the road. And purposely repressed any sense of, and the smells were everywhere. It's spring, right, on the coast. God, the flowers and bloom and everything, but not me, my nose. And I'm not going to listen to anything, so I just try to blot out and so on and so forth, pay not attention to the wind, the weather, anything. My body was vajra. And I got into the state, and so I thought, And one of the things we wrestled with a lot was before we were used to good food. I mean, you're living in the Bay Area, you're living in Berkeley, the gourmet ghetto. So both of us had our pick of really anything you wanted to eat. And all of a sudden now you don't have anything. And so what happens then, you say, it's okay, no problem. No, your mind goes crazy. You start thinking about all those things, what do you call it, the green tea ice cream with the chocolate sauce, or the pizza, or even noodles with butter and salt sauce. And so I'm going to repress. That's the beginning. And so this was quite a struggle. You don't know what you're attached to until you try to curb it. Let me just put it that way. And so, so this time, the master comes out with a couple of lay women, very sincere, who are going to make a lunch offering. And I'm going to impress him. So I'm sitting there, going, ting, ding, boom, 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 okay. And so there's a bowl of soup with all sorts of things in it. And we're just sitting there. And I'm just, just swallow it down. And I'm hoping he notices now that I've subdued my tongue. And the master goes, this is a very interesting flavor. Isn't that such and such? And the lay one says, yes, it is, master. Not everybody can detect that subtle fragrance. Oh, yeah. He says, this mixed with that vegetable is perfect for this time of the year. Because in the winter, it's too cold, but in the summer, it's too hot. In spring, it's just right. It brings you right. It's just really good. And he said it's fresh. It's not canned, right? I got it in the market. He says, really, very subtle, wonderful. And he said, you didn't put too much oil, because if you put too much oil, afterwards you can't bow, right, guys? Because you're too groggy. But not if you don't put enough, it doesn't bring out that subtle. I go, what the? It's like, here I'm trying to, okay, maybe it's just a test to see if I really subdued it, so I'm not going to be moved. No, I don't taste it. And then he says, wow, do you feel that breeze coming in off the west, off the ocean? It's kind of cool. He says, that kind of breeze this time of year can hit your meridian back here and cause you to get sick. You should put a scarf on. And I'm going there in my T-shirt and my robe, and I'm going to move, nothing, cold, hot. I'm thus unmoving. And so I think there's another test, and I'm not going to move. And the lay one had brought out these scarves. Would you like it? No, I don't want a scarf. I don't need a scarf. I'm a cultivator, okay? So this goes on, and I'm thinking, okay, he's still not asked the question. Have I really deeply entered that subdued samadhi? And it's like I'm waiting and waiting. And then, on top of that, over on the hillside, you hear this, a horse whinny. And the master said, in Chinese, 你听什么响? What's that sound? I go, I should listen to a sound. Because this guy, my teacher, has no samadhi. Maybe I should leave him like Zhi Chang. And, and the master says, that's got to be 1 to 2 years old. It's still a colt, because you can hear by the high whinny, probably looking for its mother or something, And I'm going, man! And then he looks over at me and he says, Ru Ding Ma, do you enter samadhi? And I was like, well, wait a minute. That doesn't sound like praise. It sounds like a prod. I'm like, huh? Well, yeah. He says, no. He says, you just entered dull emptiness. Huh? But I thought, he said, no. He said, well, I said, how can I be? He says, it's okay if you enter samadhi as long as the trucks do too. He said, but the trucks aren't in samadhi. And if you enter samadhi and the trucks don't, they'll run you over. So when you're bowing on the side of the road and you're protecting Hung Sure, and you don't even know if he's there or not, or if a truck hit him or killed him, or if it's too narrow, or a logging truck is coming with a wide girth, you're going to be in your samadhi? He said, you go after rebirth so fast. So I said, well, how are you supposed to do this then? I thought I was to do it. He says, no. Then he gives me this verse. He says, and Hung Sure is translated, the eyes see forms and sights, but the mind is unaware, doesn't know. The ears hear the dusty sounds, but the heart is quiet and still. Then he says, right thinking means you're apart from thinking. You think, but you have no thoughts. And I'm going, what? I'm trying to figure this out. And basically he's saying what the Hui Neng was saying. You see sights, between the sight and the organ, there's a consciousness. Wisdom consciousness recognizes it for what it is and doesn't attach to it. Ordinary consciousness attaches. And I'm going, oh, so I'm getting we were talking about it, like, so you're supposed to see, you're supposed to hear, you're supposed to smell, and supposed to tell, because that's what he was doing, but it was discerning for health, for balance, and so forth. He was doing that. Like, okay, he wasn't saying, oh, I want that soup because it tastes good, or I want that scarf because it's an exquisite silk scarf or something. It's all taken as medicine for balance. I'm going, and if I don't do that, it means I would get into a state of being unhealthy, sick, and whatnot. Oh, I get it. And he said, you know what you're doing? I said, no, what am I doing? And at that time, it's really funny. A laywoman had come out, this new product had come out. You don't tie shoes anymore. You use Velcro. So we had these sneakers with Velcro. And the master picked up my sneaker and he went, he says, you're like Velcro. What's this called? Velcro. Yeah, it's like Velcro. You stick to everything. And he said, 你们想一想, see you next time, bye-bye. And that was it. So it was a wonderful illustration, I think, of this. You know, I was into not knowing, not seeing. And he was pointing out that this is actually a kind of attachment that's masked as samadhi and liberation, and it's not really. So the trick is to be in the midst of everything, aware, discerning, alert, and yet not attaching to it, not setting up identity with it, not afraid of it, and not fond of it. But as I can say, it's not like the case that after hearing that, by the next time he came out, I had perfected it. Not quite that easy. Yes.
I'm sure it's online.
Oh.
He's asking about, what about the rock in the offering of rice?
What about what?
The rock in the offering
In
of
the
rice.
offering of rice.
The rock and the offering of life.
Right,
Rice.
rice.
Like when you're eating rice and there's a rock.
Oh. He's online. Did he put that rock in the rice? Okay, but he has to understand, whatever time it is in Australia, it's time to quit here. But I thank you for reminding me, because I can tell that story next week. That's really wonderful. That's called eating and not knowing the flavor of what you eat, which is my next samadhi. Ouch. Okay. 谢谢你. Oh gosh. Okay. So that's it for tonight. But if you remind me next week, I'll tell that story. The rock and the offering of rice. Whoa. Any announcements?
So tomorrow, 7:30 p.m., we have the Avatamsaka lecture, and Rabbi Hank Shur from Australia will be lecturing here in the screen. He will show up. So other classes, I think on Sunday we have Theravada nuns, and Arya Ananda Bodhi will come here, and all classes go like usual. More information you can find on our website, berkeleymonastery.org.
Okay, and we'll do the transference in English. May every living being, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace with hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may our minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief boundless night. Break the darkness of our endless nights. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. Ding li san ba